It is 1 a.m. in Chicago, 1 p.m. in Dhaka, and 4 on a Monday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. Let's start with President Park's New Year's press conference, her first since taking office in February last year. Now, speaking directly to the nation earlier this Monday morning, she laid out her plans for state affairs and took questions from reporters on a wide range of issues. First, here's our presidential office correspondent Eoh Jin-joo with some of the details.
Revitalizing the economy and laying the foundation for a peaceful reunification of the two Koreas will be the focus of President Park's activities in the year 2014. During a New Year's press conference on Monday, the Korean president presented a three-year plan for economic reform.
저는 올해 국민 여러분이 성과를 피부로 느낄 수 있도록 우리 경제의 혁신과 재도약을 위한 경제 혁신 3개년 계획을 세우고 이것을 성공적으로 이끌어서 국민 행복 시대를 열어가겠습니다.
The president pledged to normalize abnormal practices in society and set up the structure for a strong economy, starting with reforms in the public sector and continue her push for a creative economy. She also vowed to create an economy that balances domestic demand and exports by supporting SMEs and fostering the 5 major service industries, the sectors of health, education, tourism, finance, and software. With the two Koreas having been divided for nearly 70 years now, North Korea will also remain a top priority for the Park administration. President Park stressed that it is now time to prepare for a reunified Korea, breaking away from the threats of war and nuclear weapons. She also proposed holding a round of reunions for families separated by the Korean War around the Lunar New Year holiday, which falls in the last week of January.
이번에 설을 맞아 지난 60년을 기다려온 연로하신 이산 가족들이 상봉하도록 해서 마음의 상처가 치유될 수 있도록 해주기를 바랍니다. 북한이 이산 가족 상봉으로 첫 단추를 잘 풀어서 남북관계의 새로운 계기를 만들었으면 합니다.
On the domestic front, President Park denied rumors that there will be a cabinet reshuffle in the near future and refused to give a clear answer on her stance towards the opposition party's demand for an independent council probe into the intelligence agency's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election. The president also addressed the criticism that she hasn't been a good communicator during her first year in office, but many analysts weren't satisfied with her response. They say it shows that her concept of good communication is very different from that of the general public and opposition groups. Eoh Jin-joo, ARIRANG News.
And this just coming in, the South Korean government about an hour ago made an official request to North Korea for working-level Red Cross talks to discuss reunions of families separated by the Korean War. This is according to Seoul's Unification Ministry and follows President Park's call during her news conference earlier in the day to hold inter-Korean family reunions over the Lunar New Year holiday at the end of this month. So President Park, along with economic revitalization, has singled out a peaceful reunification of Korea as one of the core missions during her term. Our Han Da-eun looks into the detailed steps she laid out.
지금 국민들 중에는 이 통일 비용이 너무 많이 들지 않겠느냐. 그래서 굳이 통일을 할 필요가 있겠는가 하고 생각하는 그런 분들도 계시는 것으로 압니다. 그러나 저는 한마디로 통일은 대박이다. 이렇게 생각을 합니다.
President Park Geun-hye stressing that a reunification of the two Koreas would bring about enormous benefits to the nation, laid out a three-pronged plan to that end on Monday. The first step, she said, is bringing peace to the peninsula. In order to do that, she called on Seoul to maintain tight national security so that citizens can carry on with their daily lives without fear, and urged Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear program.
두 번째로는 그 대북 인도적 지원을 강화를 하고 그거를 통해서 또 남북 주민 간의 동질성 회복도 좀 더 이렇게 이루어질 수 있도록 노력을 하려고 합니다.
President Park also mentioned the need to take good care of North Korean defectors living in the South, as they play an important role in ending the division of the two Koreas. Third, the president said she will work to create a global consensus on the need for a reunified Korea. Saying she had already discussed the matter frankly with the leaders of China and Russia, President Park plans to move forward with such efforts this year. In regards to the seemingly unstable situation in the communist state, President Park said the government will prepare for any and all scenarios, as it's risky to make premature assumptions about the North's internal affairs. President Park also stated that she's willing to hold summit talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at any time, but only when the talks can bring about a substantial outcome in bringing peace to the peninsula. 한다은, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, for a more in-depth look into this highly anticipated press conference by President Park, we're joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Byung-joo, head of KLMP Consulting and our regular commentator on this program. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Now, politically speaking, this public expectations were high about this first-time press conference. But it seemed to me like President Park, in fact, put a lot of emphasis on the economic aspects of everything.
Right. She started off with economy, and she spent, in my measurement, about 2/3 or 3/4 of her, statement side. I mean, there was the first part of her statement, and then there was a Q&A. But first part, she spent a considerable amount of time on economy, and she was continuously talking about the economic revitalization, and the need to keep the upward cycle going for the economy as a whole. And she added a lot. Even when she was asked a question about the local economies, how to revitalize them, she was constantly connecting the issue to the overall need to keep the economy going on the national level. And even when she was asked the question about the reshuffling the government and even revising the constitution, she was quickly relating those points back to her emphasis on to keep the economy going as a whole. So the total focus, the way I see it, of course she had focus on North Korea and all that, but her focus was totally on the economy. And even, I have to add this, when she was asked about her personal time after her official hour is over, she was saying, still, 1 second, she cannot waste a second on anything of her time on private side of her activity, because there are all these things that needs to be done to keep the economy going. So I thought the focus was indeed economy.
Yeah, but of course she did, in fact, mention that she walks her 2 dogs after work as well. But mainly,
I don't think she could find a way to relate her points about dogs to the economy.
All right. Now, there was that 3-year economic reform plan that she proposed. What's your view?
3-year economy plan, or the Korean word for it was innovation or reform, and I thought it was very interesting. She started off with the first point about the correcting the wrongdoings or abnormalities of the past, and about that she first mentioned the reform of the public corporations there, and she acknowledged the point that the big part of the reason why public corporations are suffering from this huge debt problem itself had to do with the government failure itself, or government's own doing, previous government of course. And because I think she started off the whole the discussion of the economy with the public corporation reform, I think it will be a very top agenda for her second year for sure. So I think she made her determination very clear. And second point was about the creative economy. That point, still I think the points were not very persuasive in my own assessment, and I think we still need to see more results. I think her point was that the government worked a lot on the online side and the planning, and this year we will get to see actual outcomes on the actual real economy side, but I think we need to wait some results on that. Third point was about the strengthening the domestic demand, and together with this, the need to strengthen the SMEs. And there she was saying the whole focus of the efforts of helping the SMEs will be placed upon helping them to export. And I thought it was interesting to see that she did not really mention much about any government help for the big corporations at all, and the total focus on SME and how to help them to export and open overseas markets and so on. I thought those were very important points. And she also mentioned the service industry, right? And she specifically mentioned 5 areas: the health and welfare and the tourism, education and software. So service industry focusing on that side or relating to those areas, especially SMEs, I think we need to wait for more details about policy initiatives on that front.
Now, of course, economy was her top priority, seemed like, but North Korea was also the other arm of her speech today.
Right.
Now, and even with regard to North Korea issue, it seemed like her focus was on the economic aspects of all things, and particularly on the reunification of the Korean Peninsula.
Right.
She went as far as saying that it would be a jackpot for the Korean Peninsula.
Right. I was really surprised with that expression itself, very casual expression that can be translated into jackpot. Unification of Korea will be a jackpot for Korean economy. And I think it's a very fresh view in a way, because we have to consider that there is a considerable size of population in Korea that may be quite hesitant to see unification because of the economic cost.
Right.
And she's bringing in this new picture and new idea about how to view the possibility of unification in a very, very positive light. And so it's one of the most noted point, in my own view, in her press conference today. And I think, of course, we need more discussion on this point, how unification could be a real jackpot for the Korean economy. And she mentioned one of the foreign investors' perspective on this, and we need more discussion on that. But however, once again, going back to my first point, even unification, even North Korean issue had economic focus. So I thought that was very interesting.
Right, and we had the rush report coming in that immediately following President Park's call for a reunion of families for the Lunar New Year's.
Right.
The South Korean government has made that official proposal to North Korea at about 3 p.m. today. So we'll have to wait and see what the response would be from North Korea. Now, during the Q&A session with the reporters, President Park was asked about the real estate market and tax hikes. And now, any points of that's worth of noting?
Number one, real estate market was treated as one of the important points in her press conference. I was quite surprised about that and by that. But her points about the real estate market itself was, I didn't find anything new, trying to help the poor, and especially those people who have borrowed big time and are suffering from the fact that their houses are underwater still in a way because of the fall of the asset market itself, and trying to help those low-income Koreans with low incomes to buy their own houses with low-interest loans and so on. Those were not totally fresh, new ideas there, but she emphasized, in my own view, that government will go ahead with the conventional methods of helping those ordinary Koreans there. And about the tax side, I thought it was quite interesting, because what was agreed at the National Assembly at the end of the year, was it last week? She seemed to have presented the picture this morning that it was not the government's idea, but it was something that was agreed between the two parties, meaning the increase of the tax itself by lowering the threshold for charging high rates. So I think she was being firm and being clear that she is a president that emphasizes a principle and the promise. So I thought there was a very interesting political statement, if you will.
Now, one member of the foreign press, in fact, asked her about the strong won and weak yen. And in her response, did we get a glimpse of a solid glimpse of her basic stance on these economic issues?
I think, in a way, her approach that emphasizes principle once again. She didn't say anything about of course, I don't think President is in a position to talk about any market intervention there, but she said this kind of market fluctuation, exchange rate itself is a good opportunity to actually strengthen the competitiveness of Korean business. And no matter what happens, Korean business should be in a position to deal with this kind of market fluctuation. So I thought, once again, she was a president that emphasizes principle and then key market, discipline and all that. And I thought her response to that itself was a very positive one, indeed. So it's one of the points that I liked a lot.
Turning crisis into opportunity.
Right.
So, Dr. Kim, all in all, your overall assessment of this first news conference by President Park. And do you think it served the purpose of her attempt to, I suppose, get rid of her reputation as a leader who lacks communication?
Well, I think, we have a old Korean saying that one spoonful of rice does not make you full, right? So I think this was a good start, and I think we should have more of these and more often. And I think that's the most important point about what happened this morning.
All right, Dr. Kim Myung-joo, thank you so much for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
With rapid changes in the global economy, up-to-date business and financial news has never been more essential. See what's making markets tick around the globe. We speak to the experts and cover the biggest financial stories.
North Korea provocation.
Quite good. We received a lot of positive feedback, especially from local blogs.
Meanwhile, Pyongyang took aim at President Park and his North Korea policy on this Monday, calling for an overhaul if inter-Korean relations are to improve anytime soon. The North state-run Rodong-Shinmun newspaper said President Park's emphasis on sticking to her principles was the main stumbling block to bettering cross-border relations as it encourages competition between the two Koreas. As for Seoul's heightened security measures against possible threats from Pyongyang, the newspaper said it was shameful that the South would rest the fate of the two Koreas in the hands of a foreign power, of course referring to the American military presence on the Korean peninsula. The top foreign policymakers from South Korea and the United States are due to meet in Washington this week for talks that are expected to focus primarily on North Korea and Japan. Meeting with reporters on Sunday local time, South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se said he would relay South Korea's position on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's recent visit to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine, the resting place of several Class A war criminals.
It's not a simple matter between the two countries, but a shared interest of the international community. So I plan to deliver South Korea's stance to officials of all ranks that I meet in Washington.
Now, Yoon and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry are scheduled to meet on Tuesday, where they will coordinate their North Korea policies following the recent execution of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's uncle Jang Song-taek. Now, they're also expected to discuss ways to restart the stalled six-party talks on the North denuclearization. During his visit, Yoon is also scheduled to meet with Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel and Senator Robert Menendez, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Washington is demanding that Seoul increase its share of the cost of stationing U.S. troops in Korea as the two sides prepare to resume talks on the issue in Seoul on Thursday. Seoul-based Yonhap News reports that Washington is demanding Seoul contribute roughly $900 million under the new agreement, which is an increase of about 9.2% from the previous agreement, which expired last year. Well, Seoul wants its contribution to be roughly $850 million, given that the annual rate of increase under the previous five-year agreement was capped at 4% and that there have been minimal changes in the number of troops and the conditions in which they serve. Now, in domestic politics, political wrangling at the National Assembly in the past year has done more than frustrate the Korean public. It's made this parliament one of the least productive in more than a decade. Lawmakers have submitted more than 8,500 bills since the current 19th National Assembly began work in 2012, which is a 23% increase from the previous assembly and a record high in Korean parliamentary history. But this assembly passed just over 10% of the bills in the first year, the lowest rate since the 16th assembly, which began its term in June 2000. The passage rate in 2000 was about 40%. The National Assembly Secretariat says the prolonged deadlock between the rival parties and the subsequent lack of time for deliberation is to blame for the low passage rate. A new subsidiary of the state-run rail operator Korail could open as early as this week. The creation of the affiliate is what sparked the nation's longest ever rail strike last month, with unionized workers accusing Korail and the government of attempting to privatize the rail services. Our Kwon So-ah has this report.
Korail's new subsidiary is a step closer to launch. The state-run rail operator says the affiliate, which will operate KTX bullet trains departing from Suseok, a station in southern Seoul, is beginning to take shape and may open as early as this week. Korail received a business license from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport at the end of last month and has set office at its headquarters in Daejeon. 50 employees, mainly from Korail, are expected to be dispatched within this week. The workforce will gradually expand to over 400 people. In an effort to minimize costs, Korail plans to hire externally, except for core employees such as engineers and crew members. Once construction of the railway is completed by the end of next year, the Transport Ministry expects an average of nearly 55,000 travelers a day to use the line in 2016. Korail says that as Suseok will be the second KTX departure station in the capital, the internal competition between it and Seoul Station will generate new demand, improve efficiency, and drive bigger profits. However, the labor union still believes Korail's move will eventually open the door towards the privatization of the company. Unionized workers filed a lawsuit last week demanding the government withdraw its license for the subsidiary. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And here's how the markets closed here in Seoul. Korean shares on this Monday edged off a 4-month closing low in the previous session, but gains were capped on concerns over local firms' earnings prospects due to the Japanese yen's weakness and a sluggish Chinese economy. Foreign investors were net buyers of 51.5 billion won, roughly $48.8 million worth of Korean stocks today, supporting the main index. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi closed up nearly 0.4% at 1953, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also finished at nearly 0.3% higher. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency closed weaker against the greenback at roughly 1,065.5 won. Well, the number of foreign tourists to Korea increased last year, but that hasn't translated into economic gains as the relative strength of the Korean won appears to have made tourists less willing to spend during their stay in this country. Our Son Jung-in reports.
The number of overseas travelers to Korea has been growing steadily over the last decade, with the number surpassing the 12 million mark for the first time just last month. This represents a 9% increase from the 11,140,000 visitors who came to Korea in 2012 to the 12,100,000 in 2013, according to the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute. Yet, the surge in foreign visitors has not resulted in a corresponding increase in the amount of income from tourism during the same period. The amount of production spurred by tourism decreased to $24.2 billion in 2013, down from $25 billion the previous year, while the number of jobs lost because of the loss of tourism revenue was around 6,500. Industry analysts say the reason for the trend is that tourists are less willing to spend in Korea because of the won's rise against the dollar. In fact, the average spending for foreign tourists was $1,130 per person in 2013, down from $1,207 in 2012, with their combined expenditure dropping by nearly $480 million. Experts say in order to turn the situation around, the government should come up with ways to customize package tours and improve customer satisfaction levels in order to meet the changing demands of foreign tourists. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
The U.S. is bracing for a record-breaking chill this week. It's called the polar vortex, and it's an Arctic cold front that's expected to affect 140 million people. That's nearly half of the U.S. population, with dangerously low temperatures. Connie Lee has more.
After being hit by a blizzard at the start of the new year, people in the Midwest and Northeast United States are now bracing for another blast of dangerous wintry weather. This time, a record-breaking one. The National Weather Service warned Sunday that much of the U.S. will see temperatures that will be the coldest on record in almost 20 years. In a statement, the service said that it may feel as cold as -50 to -60 degrees Fahrenheit, or that's -45 to -51 Celsius on Sunday night over sections of the north-central states. Under these conditions, forecasters warn that frostbite can occur on exposed skin within 5 minutes. The freezing cold temperatures are the result of what's called a polar vortex, an Arctic cold front that is set to descend over much of the U.S. By Wednesday, forecasters say nearly half the nation will be shivering in below freezing temperatures. Officials in several states have now asked residents to take extra precautions in the days ahead.
Cold really scares me, and it's such that we will have temperatures that are potentially deadly or certainly life-altering temperatures right now, and we have to be very, very careful with that.
The state of Minnesota ordered all public schools to be closed on Monday ahead of the cold snap, and shoppers in other Midwest states empty shelves at stores to stock up on supplies. The latest winter storm comes after a massive wintry weather system hit the Midwest and Northeast a day after New Year's. The storm killed at least a dozen people, grounded more than 6,000 flights, and forced schools and government offices to close. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast, but stay tuned to ARIRANG. We have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6.